The most dangerous empath is not the one who cries the loudest, loves the hardest, or sacrifices the most. The most dangerous empath is the one who has reached the Sophia stage, the stage most empaths never reach. And when I say dangerous, I don't mean harmful, I mean unstoppable. I mean impossible to manipulate. I mean someone who has finally learned the difference between compassion and self-destruction. The Sophia stage is the highest level of empath evolution, and very few people ever reach it because it requires a complete transformation of how an empath views themselves, others, and the world around them. Most empaths begin their journey believing that their purpose is to help everyone they encounter. They naturally absorb emotions, understand pain, and often feel responsible for fixing problems that were never theirs to solve. Because of this deep sensitivity, they become caregivers, listeners, and supporters. They are the people others run to during moments of crisis. They provide comfort when someone is hurting, guidance when someone is confused, and understanding when someone feels alone. While these qualities are admirable, they can also become dangerous when an empath forgets to protect their own emotional well-being. In the early stages of empath development, there is often a strong desire to be needed, not because the empath is selfish, but because helping others gives them a sense of purpose. They feel valuable when they can make someone else's life better. Unfortunately, this can attract people who take advantage of their kindness. Manipulators, narcissists, and emotionally unhealthy individuals quickly recognize that the empath has difficulty saying no. They learn that the empath will continue giving chances long after most people would have walked away. Over time, this creates cycles of emotional exhaustion, disappointment, and heartbreak. The empath begins to notice a painful pattern. The more they give, the more people seem to take. The more they sacrifice, the less appreciated they feel. Relationships become one-sided, friendships become draining, family connections become complicated. The empath may spend years wondering why their good intentions are not producing the healthy relationships they expected. They question themselves constantly. They wonder if they are being too sensitive, too trusting, or too forgiving. Yet despite all the pain, many continue repeating the same behaviors because they believe love means endurance. The journey toward the Sophia stage begins when the empath finally realizes that wisdom cannot be developed without experience. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every broken promise becomes a lesson rather than a punishment. Instead of asking why people hurt them, they begin asking what they can learn from those experiences. This shift changes everything. The empath starts understanding that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. They discover that being kind does not mean tolerating disrespect. They learn that understanding someone's behavior does not mean accepting it. As this awareness grows, the empath undergoes a profound internal transformation. They stop viewing boundaries as walls and begin seeing them as necessary forms of self-respect. They realize that boundaries are not designed to keep good people out. They are designed to prevent unhealthy people from causing harm. For perhaps the first time in their life, they begin prioritizing their own emotional health without feeling guilty about it. This is a difficult step because many empaths have spent years placing everyone else's needs before their own. The Sophia stage represents the moment when emotional intelligence evolves into wisdom. The empath no longer relies solely on feelings to guide decisions. Instead, they balance empathy with discernment. They listen to their intuition, observe behavior carefully, and recognize patterns that once went unnoticed. They understand that words can be convincing, but actions reveal the truth. They become skilled at identifying manipulation, dishonesty, and emotional games long before those behaviors can cause significant damage. What makes this stage so powerful is that the empath remains compassionate while becoming incredibly strong. They do not lose their kindness. They do not become cold or cynical. Instead, they develop the ability to care deeply without losing themselves in someone else's chaos. Their heart remains open, but their judgment becomes sharper. They can offer support without becoming responsible for another person's choices. They can love without abandoning their own needs. This is why the Sophia stage is considered the highest level of empath evolution. It is not about becoming harder, it is about becoming wiser. It is the stage where sensitivity becomes strength, experience becomes wisdom, and compassion becomes balanced with self-respect. Few empaths reach this level because it requires tremendous courage, self-awareness, and growth. Those who do become something rare, individuals who understand human nature deeply while remaining completely connected to their own worth. One of the defining characteristics of the Sophia stage is that the empath no longer seeks validation from others. This transformation sounds simple on the surface, but for many empaths it is one of the most difficult lessons they will ever learn. Throughout much of their lives, empaths often develop a habit of measuring their value through the reactions, approval, and acceptance of other people. Because they are naturally sensitive to emotions and highly aware of the needs of those around them, they become skilled at adjusting themselves to make others comfortable. They learn how to keep peace, avoid conflict, and earn appreciation. Over time, this creates an invisible dependence on external validation that many empaths do not even realize exists. In the earlier stages of development, an empath may feel successful when others praise them for their kindness. They feel secure when people need them. They feel valued when their efforts are recognized and appreciated. While there is nothing wrong with enjoying positive feedback, problems begin when self-worth becomes dependent on it. The empath starts looking outside themselves for confirmation that they are good enough, lovable enough, or worthy enough. Their confidence rises and falls according to how others treat them. If someone approves of them, they feel secure. If someone criticizes them, rejects them, or misunderstands them, they begin questioning their value. This pattern often leads to emotional exhaustion. The empath spends enormous amounts of energy trying to maintain relationships, avoid disappointing people, and meet expectations that are constantly changing. They become trapped in a cycle of proving themselves. They explain their intentions repeatedly. They seek understanding from people who have already chosen not to understand them. They continue giving chances because they hope their efforts will eventually be recognized. Unfortunately, validation that comes from others is never stable. People's opinions change. Their moods change. Their expectations change. Building self-worth on such an unstable foundation inevitably creates insecurity. The path toward the Sophia stage begins when the empath experiences enough disappointment to question this entire way of living. They start noticing that no matter how much they give, someone will always want more. No matter how carefully they explain themselves, someone will still misunderstand them. No matter how hard they try to please everyone, someone will remain unhappy. These realizations can be painful at first because they challenge beliefs the empath may have carried for years. Gradually, a new understanding emerges. The empath begins to recognize that their value cannot be determined by people who only see fragments of who they are. They realize that approval is not the same thing as self-respect. They understand that being liked by everyone is neither possible nor necessary. This awareness marks the beginning of true emotional freedom. As they continue growing, the empath becomes less concerned with how they are perceived and more focused on whether they are living in alignment with their values. They stop constantly editing themselves to fit other people's expectations. They stop apologizing for having needs, boundaries, or opinions. They become comfortable with the fact that some people will appreciate them while others will not. Instead of chasing acceptance, they choose authenticity. This shift changes every aspect of their life. Relationships become healthier because they are no longer based on approval seeking. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by personal values rather than fear of judgment. The empath develops a quiet confidence that does not require constant reinforcement from others. They know who they are even when nobody is applauding. They trust their instincts even when others disagree. Perhaps the most powerful part of this transformation is that the empath no longer feels compelled to prove their goodness. They understand that genuine character reveals itself through consistent actions, not endless explanations. They no longer waste energy convincing people of their intentions. Instead, they allow their behavior to speak for itself. This is one of the greatest signs that an empath has entered the Sophia stage. Their sense of worth comes from within, rather than from external approval. They stop searching for validation because they have discovered something far more valuable: self-acceptance. Once this happens, they become emotionally independent in a way that most people never achieve, carrying a confidence that remains steady regardless of who chooses to recognize it. One of the most powerful transformations that occurs in the Sophia stage is the moment an empath begins turning emotional pain into wisdom and self-mastery. Most people experience pain and spend their lives trying to avoid it, suppress it, or escape from it. Empaths are no different. In fact, because they feel emotions so intensely, painful experiences often affect them more deeply than they affect others. Rejection feels heavier. Betrayal cuts deeper. Disappointment lingers longer. The empath not only feels their own emotions but frequently absorbs the emotional energy of everyone around them as well. This combination can make life's challenges seem overwhelming at times. In the earlier stages of development, emotional pain often leaves the empath confused. They wonder why they continue attracting difficult relationships, why they repeatedly encounter selfish people, or why their kindness is so often taken for granted. They search for answers outside themselves, hoping to find an explanation that will make sense of their suffering. Many become trapped in cycles of overthinking, replaying conversations in their minds and analyzing situations from every possible angle. They believe that if they can understand exactly what went wrong, they will finally find peace. Unfortunately, this approach rarely works. The more they focus on the pain itself, the stronger its grip becomes. The empath may spend years carrying wounds from past experiences, allowing old disappointments to influence current decisions. Fear begins to replace trust. Anxiety begins to replace confidence. They become cautious not because they are wise, but because they are afraid of being hurt again. The Sophia Stage introduces a completely different perspective. Instead of asking how to avoid pain, the empath begins asking how to learn from it. This subtle shift changes everything. Pain is no longer viewed as an enemy, it becomes a teacher. Every difficult experience contains information. Every betrayal reveals something about trust. Every disappointment teaches something about expectations. Every loss provides insight into attachment. The empath begins extracting lessons from experiences that once seemed meaningless. This process requires tremendous courage because it demands complete honesty. The empath can no longer focus exclusively on what others did wrong. They must also examine their own patterns. They begin asking difficult questions. Why did they ignore warning signs? Why did they continue giving chances when boundaries were repeatedly violated? Why did they prioritize someone else's needs while neglecting their own? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary for growth. As self-awareness increases, the empath starts recognizing patterns that have existed for years. They notice how often they confused potential with reality. They see how frequently they hoped people would become different instead of accepting them as they were. They understand how their desire to help sometimes prevented them from seeing situations clearly. Rather than judging themselves for these mistakes, they learn from them. Over time, emotional pain begins transforming into wisdom. The lessons become part of the empath's character. Experiences that once created weakness now create strength. Situations that once caused confusion now provide clarity. The empath develops a deeper understanding of human nature because they have observed it firsthand. They no longer rely solely on idealism. Their perspective becomes balanced by experience. This wisdom naturally leads to self-mastery. The empath becomes more aware of their emotional triggers and learns how to manage them effectively. Instead of reacting impulsively, they pause and reflect. Instead of allowing emotions to control decisions, they use emotions as valuable information. They understand that feelings are important, but they also recognize that feelings should not always dictate behavior. Self-mastery does not mean becoming emotionless. It means developing the ability to experience emotions without being controlled by them. The Sophia empath still feels deeply. They still care deeply. The difference is that they are no longer overwhelmed by every emotional storm that passes through their life. They have learned how to remain grounded even during difficult circumstances. One of the greatest signs of this transformation is resilience. Challenges that once would have shattered them now become opportunities for growth. They recover more quickly from setbacks because they trust their ability to learn and adapt. They no longer fear pain the way they once did because they understand its purpose. They know that every experience, whether positive or negative, has the potential to contribute to their evolution. The Sophia Stage represents the point where suffering stops being a source of weakness and becomes a source of wisdom. The empath discovers that true strength is not found in avoiding life's difficulties, but in learning from them. Through this process, emotional pain becomes one of the greatest tools for personal growth, shaping an individual who is wiser, stronger, more self-aware, and far more capable of navigating the complexities of human relationships and life itself. A defining characteristic of the Sophia Stage is that boundaries become stronger than emotional attachment. This is one of the most difficult transformations an empath can experience because, for much of their life, emotional attachment often guides their decisions more than logic, self-protection, or personal well-being. Empaths naturally form deep connections with people. They do not simply hear someone's struggles, they feel them. They do not merely observe pain, they absorb it. Because of this ability, they often develop intense emotional bonds that can make it extremely difficult to walk away from unhealthy situations. In the earlier stages of empath development, attachment frequently overrides judgment. An empath may recognize that a relationship is damaging, yet remain committed because they understand the other person's pain. They may see red flags, but they focus on potential rather than reality. They may experience repeated disappointment, but continue hoping that things will eventually improve. Their compassion becomes so powerful that it blinds them to patterns that would be obvious to an outside observer. Many empaths confuse understanding someone with being responsible for them. If they can see the reasons behind a person's behavior, they often feel obligated to remain patient. If they know someone has experienced trauma, they may excuse actions that should not be tolerated. If they love someone deeply, they may convince themselves that endurance is proof of loyalty. Unfortunately, this mindset often leads to emotional exhaustion, resentment, and repeated heartbreak. The problem is not attachment itself. Human connection is a natural and important part of life. The problem occurs when attachment becomes stronger than self-respect. When this happens, the empath begins sacrificing personal peace to maintain relationships that no longer serve them. They ignore their intuition. They silence their needs. They compromise their values, all because they fear losing the connection they have formed. The journey into the Sophia stage begins when the empath finally understands that healthy relationships should not require the abandonment of personal boundaries. This realization often arrives after years of painful experiences. The empath reaches a point where they can no longer ignore the cost of constantly putting others first. They begin noticing how much energy is spent managing other people's emotions while neglecting their own. They recognize that endless tolerance is not always a virtue. Sometimes it is simply a lack of boundaries. As wisdom develops, the empath starts redefining what love and compassion truly mean. They realize that caring about someone does not require accepting harmful behavior. They learn that understanding another person's struggles does not obligate them to endure mistreatment. They discover that empathy without boundaries often becomes self-destruction. This awareness transforms how they approach relationships. Instead of asking, "How can I help this person?" they begin asking, "Is this relationship healthy for both of us?" Instead of focusing entirely on another person's needs, they start considering their own emotional well-being. For many empaths, this shift initially feels uncomfortable. They may experience guilt when saying no. They may worry about disappointing people. They may fear being perceived as selfish. Over time, however, they begin to understand that boundaries are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of self-respect. Boundaries communicate what is acceptable and what is not. They protect emotional health, preserve energy, and create space for genuine connection. Without boundaries, relationships often become imbalanced. With boundaries, relationships have the opportunity to become healthier and more authentic. One of the most remarkable changes during the Sophia stage is that the empath becomes willing to lose relationships that require them to lose themselves. This does not happen because they care less. In many cases, they care just as deeply as before. The difference is that they finally recognize their own value. They understand that no relationship should demand the sacrifice of their mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being. This newfound strength often surprises people around them. Individuals who once relied on the empath's endless patience may become frustrated when limits are established. Those who benefited from weak boundaries may accuse the empath of changing. In reality, the empath has changed. They have evolved. They have learned that love without boundaries invites exploitation, while love with boundaries creates respect. As attachment loses its control, clarity increases. The empath becomes more objective when evaluating relationships. They pay closer attention to actions rather than promises. They recognize patterns instead of focusing solely on intentions. They stop confusing emotional intensity with genuine connection. This allows them to make decisions based on reality rather than hope alone. The Sophia empath understands that boundaries are not barriers designed to keep people away. They are filters that allow healthy relationships to flourish while limiting access to those who repeatedly cause harm. Their compassion remains intact, but it is no longer limitless. Their kindness remains genuine, but it is no longer unconditional in situations that involve disrespect or manipulation. They finally understand that protecting their peace is not a betrayal of others. It is an expression of the wisdom they have earned through experience, growth, and a deeper understanding of their own worth. One of the most remarkable abilities developed in the Sophia stage is the capacity to see manipulation before it happens. This is not because the Sophia empath possesses supernatural powers or some mysterious gift that allows them to read minds. Rather, it is the result of years of experience, observation, emotional intelligence, and hard-earned wisdom. Most empaths spend a significant portion of their lives trying to understand people. They pay attention to emotions, behaviors, moods, and subtle changes in energy that many others completely overlook. Over time, this constant observation creates a deep understanding of human nature. In the earlier stages of their journey, however, empaths often struggle to use this awareness effectively. They sense when something feels wrong, but they frequently ignore their instincts. They give people the benefit of the doubt even when warning signs are obvious. They assume others have good intentions because they themselves operate from a place of sincerity and compassion. This tendency can make them vulnerable to manipulation. Manipulative individuals often recognize these qualities quickly. They understand that empaths want to believe the best about people. They know empaths dislike conflict and prefer harmony. They realize that empaths are naturally forgiving and willing to consider another person's perspective. Because of this, manipulators may use guilt, emotional pressure, false promises, or carefully crafted stories to gain influence. In many cases, the empath sees pieces of the truth but chooses to focus on potential rather than reality. The Sophia Stage changes this dynamic completely. After experiencing enough disappointment and learning enough lessons, the empath begins trusting their perceptions. They stop dismissing uncomfortable feelings simply because they want a positive outcome. They become more willing to accept what they observe, even when the truth is unpleasant. One reason this transformation occurs is because the Sophia empath becomes highly skilled at recognizing patterns. They understand that manipulation rarely begins with obvious control. It often starts with subtle behaviors. A person may consistently avoid accountability. They may create confusion during important conversations. They may shift blame whenever problems arise. They may use excessive charm to gain trust quickly, or present themselves as a victim in every situation. While these signs might appear insignificant individually, the Sophia empath notices how they fit together. Rather than focusing solely on what people say, they pay close attention to what people do. They understand that words can be persuasive, emotional, and convincing. Actions, however, reveal character. If someone's promises repeatedly fail to match their behavior, the Sophia empath takes notice. If someone continuously creates the same problems while offering the same excuses, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Another important aspect of this stage is emotional detachment. In the past, attachment may have clouded judgment. The empath wanted relationships to succeed so badly that they overlooked warning signs. In the Sophia stage, emotions no longer dominate perception. The empath can care deeply about someone while still evaluating their behavior objectively. This balance creates clarity. The Sophia empath also becomes comfortable with uncomfortable truths. They no longer need every person to be good, honest, or trustworthy. They accept that human beings are complex and that some individuals operate from selfish motives. This acceptance allows them to see situations more clearly without becoming cynical or bitter. Perhaps the greatest protection against manipulation is the Sophia empath's willingness to walk away. Manipulation loses its power when it no longer produces the desired result. The empath is no longer controlled by guilt, fear, obligation, or the need for approval. They understand that preserving their peace is more important than maintaining unhealthy connections. Because of this wisdom, manipulators often find the Sophia empath difficult to influence. The tactics that once worked no longer produce the same response. Emotional games are recognized quickly. Contradictions are noticed. Hidden agendas become easier to identify. The empath remains compassionate and understanding, but they are no longer easily deceived. Their awareness has been sharpened by experience, their intuition strengthened by wisdom, and their judgment refined through years of growth, making them exceptionally skilled at recognizing manipulation long before it has the opportunity to take hold. The final and perhaps most powerful characteristic of the Sophia stage is the understanding that an empath's greatest strength is calm detachment, not emotional reaction. This lesson takes years and sometimes decades to fully learn because emotional reactions have often been a central part of the empath's life. Empaths feel deeply. They naturally connect with emotions, both their own and those of others. They care intensely about people, relationships, fairness, and truth. Because of this sensitivity, they can easily become emotionally invested in situations that affect them or those they love. During the earlier stages of their journey, many empaths believe that reacting emotionally is a sign of authenticity. If they feel hurt, they express it immediately. If they feel betrayed, they seek answers. If they feel misunderstood, they explain themselves repeatedly in hopes of being heard. While these responses are understandable, They often place the empath in a vulnerable position. Highly emotional reactions can be used by manipulative individuals to create confusion, gain control, or provoke further conflict. Many empaths spend years trapped in cycles of emotional engagement. They feel responsible for resolving every misunderstanding. They attempt to fix every relationship. They explain their intentions over and over again, hoping that eventually someone will understand their perspective. Unfortunately, some people are not interested in understanding. Some people are interested only in winning, controlling, or maintaining power within a relationship. The empath eventually discovers that no amount of explanation can change someone who is committed to misunderstanding them. This realization becomes one of the most important turning points in the Sophia stage. The empath begins to understand that emotional reactions often give away personal power. When every criticism receives a response, every accusation receives a defense, and every conflict receives an emotional reaction, other people gain influence over the empath's emotional state. Their peace becomes dependent on external circumstances. The Sophia empath gradually learns a different approach. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause. Instead of allowing emotions to dictate behavior, they observe what is happening. They recognize that emotions provide valuable information, but they do not automatically require action. This simple shift creates extraordinary clarity. Calm detachment does not mean becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. It does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. Rather, it means creating enough emotional space to evaluate a situation clearly before responding. The Sophia empath still experiences emotions deeply, but they no longer allow emotions to take control of their decisions. As this skill develops, the empath becomes far more difficult to manipulate. Provocation loses its effectiveness because the empath no longer reacts automatically. Guilt loses its power because they evaluate situations objectively. Drama loses its appeal because they understand that not every conflict deserves participation. Their calmness becomes a source of strength rather than weakness. People are often surprised by this transformation. Those who once expected immediate reactions may become frustrated when they encounter patience and composure instead. Individuals who relied on emotional chaos may find themselves unable to create the same level of influence. The Sophia empath has learned that silence can sometimes be more powerful than argument, and that observation can be more valuable than confrontation. Another benefit of calm detachment is improved decision-making. Emotional reactions are often temporary, influenced by stress, fear, anger, or disappointment. When decisions are made from a reactive state, they frequently lead to regret. The Sophia empath understands this and chooses to wait until emotions settle before making important choices. This patience allows wisdom to guide actions rather than impulse. Over time, calm detachment creates a profound sense of inner stability. External events still matter, but they no longer determine the empath's emotional state. The opinions of others become less controlling. Criticism becomes easier to evaluate objectively. Praise becomes less necessary for confidence. The empath develops a strong internal foundation that is not easily shaken by circumstances. This is why calm detachment represents one of the highest expressions of wisdom within the Sophia stage. It allows the empath to remain compassionate without becoming overwhelmed, involved without becoming consumed, and emotionally aware without becoming emotionally controlled. Their strength no longer comes from reacting to every challenge they encounter. Their strength comes from their ability to remain centered, observant, and composed regardless of what is happening around them. In that state of calm awareness, they possess a level of personal power, clarity, and self-mastery that very few people ever achieve.